Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it.
We're often told that we need the hardworking, socially contributing immigrant. Our societies do not have a sustainable birth rate, and we need immigrants to pay our pensions and old age health care, and the general upkeep as, well, for us it's the baby boomers, retire and stop contributing and start taking from the system. Now, to understand the article we're going to cover, you need to understand the definition of potential support ratio. Now, this is very simple. It's basically the proportion between working age people to retired people. Specifically, the definition is the number of people aged 15 to 64 per one person older than age 65. And so this UN paper that we're going to look at today is from 2001, so the statistics used will be outdated, but that's not important. What we're going to be looking at is the examples given. This is more a demonstration of statistics than just a listing of facts. So this is from the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs Population Division, and the article we're going to be reading is Germany. Oh, I wanted to point this out before we get into the article. Okay, so the report focuses on 8 low fertility countries and 2 regions. The 2 regions are Europe and the European Union. Most people, I would think, would say those are one region. I just thought that was weird. Does the UN divide Europe up that way? So with that oddity pointed out, we're going to read their study on Germany. So this is actually quite short. I'm just going to more or less read it and offer a little commentary in between. Everything that follows the scenarios, they list the same set of details given their different scenario prediction. While the total fertility rate increased steadily from 2.16 to 2.49 children per woman between 1950 and 1955 and 1960 to 1965, Germany experienced a continuous decline afterwards to 1.3 children per woman in 1990 to 1995. As in other countries in Western Europe, life expectancy increased during the entire period between 1950 and 1995. It reached 76 years for both sexes during the interval of 1990 to 1995, up from 67.5 years for 1950 to 1955. One of the results of increased life expectancy and low fertility rates is the process of population aging. The proportion of the population aged 65 or older increased from 9.7% in 1950 to 15.5% in 1995. The potential support ratio declined from 6.9 persons aged 15 to 64 for one person aged 65 or older in 1950 to 4.4 persons in 1995. So the most important takeaways from that paragraph are going to be the potential support ratio, which was nearly 7 in 1950 and was around 4.5 in 1995. Under scenario 1, Germany takes in roughly 200,000 immigrants per year. This would mean that the population of Germany would go from 81.7 million in 1995 to 82.4 million in 2005. Thereafter, the population would continuously decline to 73.3 million in 2050. The population aged 15 to 64 would increase from 55.8 million in 1995 to 56 million in 2000. Between 2000 and 2050, it would decrease continually to 42.7 million. The share of the elderly 65 and above would increase from 12.6 million in 1995, that's 15.5% of the population, to 20.8 million in 2050, that's 28.4% of the population. Consequently, the potential support ratio would be halved, decreasing from 4.4 in 1995 to 2.1 in 2050. Scenario 2 is without any migration to Germany after 1995. Under their projections, the population would decrease 28% by 2050 to 58.8 million people. This would result in a potential support ratio of 1.8 in 2050. So a potential support ratio of 1.8 could be seen as the most extreme consequence of stopping immigration policies. If we stopped all immigration altogether, it would be 1.8 by 2050. Scenario 3 seeks to keep the population of Germany stable between 1995 and 2050 at 81.7 million, which they say would require substantially higher immigration than anticipated by the United Nations 1998 revision. I can only imagine that since being completely shattered. Between 1995 to 2050, a total of 17.8 million net immigrants would be needed, an average of 324,000 per year. Now we're going to take a little aside because I can only imagine that Germany actually gets more than that. Well, things must be bad because I can't actually find how many immigrants they're taking per year. I see refugees, but they're kind of quiet on the rest of it. Anyway, Canada's beating that figure and we're less than half that population, so I imagine Germany's around that level, if not a little past it. So given this scenario, which is kind of proximal to the one that Germany is currently on, that would put the potential support ratio in 2050 at 2.3. So if we stopped all immigration altogether, it would be 1.8. If we take 17.8 million immigrants, it would be 2.3. Now, that could be slightly misleading because that half a person is, quite a lot. But that 0.5% change between no immigration and current immigration is completely dwarfed by the change of 2 to 2.5 just from the natural aging process. So under this scenario, 23 million people, or 28% of the population, would be post-1995 migrants or their descendants. Stats already say that over 1/5 of Germans are migrants or descendants. So I think I must be right about them shattering those figures. Scenario 5 seeks to keep the working age population constant until the year 2050, which would require 25 million immigrants, an average of 458,000 per year, putting the population of Germany at 92 million in 2050, putting the country at 36% migrants and descendants. The potential support ratio would be 2.4. Wait a minute. That's barely changed. That's gone up 0.1. And we've nearly doubled the immigration rates there. Scenario 5 seeks to keep the potential support ratio below, to never let it drop below 3. So they say that they would then take no immigrants until 2015. It's kind of a weird way to approach it. And then 40.5 million immigrants between 2015 and 2035, an average of 2 million per year during that period. By 2050, the population would be 113 million, and 48% of that population would be post-1995 immigrants or descendants. Scenario 7 wants to keep the potential support ratio constant at its 1995 level of 4.4 until 2050. The total immigrants needed between 1995 and 2050 to keep this ratio constant would be 188.5 million, which is an average of 3.4 million migrants per year. Somebody type that out. That's an actual scenario in a government paper. And now, I suppose they wanted that to be demonstrative, and it will be actually, but it will be for us. So that would keep the potential support ratio at 4.4, that bringing in 188.5 million immigrants. The total population would be 299 million, of which 80% would be post-1995 migrants. So this is kind of fascinating. In the absence of migration, the figures show that it would be necessary to raise the upper limit of the working age to 72.4 years to obtain a potential support ratio of 3 in 2050, and to about 77 years in order to obtain in 2050 the same potential support ratio observed in Germany in 1995, which was about 4.4 persons of working age per each older person past working age. So I don't know what the retirement age is in Germany, but if you raise it just a little bit, you wouldn't need to replace your civilization. If you bumped the retirement age up 10 years, maybe, I don't know when you retire, like I say. 10 years would do the same job as, 200 million immigrants? 188 million immigrants. I mean, if only the government had told me that I had a choice, I could work an extra day on the weekend or replace 80% of my population. I wish I'd known. Now, even ignoring the investment that you could be making in your own people to help them be more productive, live longer, etc., have their own savings. Instead, their taxes are raised to pay for a problem, and in fact, they're going into debt and paying interest to pay for a problem that they're just pushing down the road and making worse. It's a snowball that's going to turn into an avalanche if you import, 20, 40, 80, 188.5 million immigrants. Because what happens when they age? Are you going to import, 6.49 billion people? I don't think you're going to be able to do that. But if you remember my video about Australian demographics, if you were to cut off immigration entirely, even at current birth rates, the population wouldn't actually decrease for around 100 years. And I think if everybody was old and the population is decreasing, maybe people would have a couple more babies. There are clearly other solutions to mass immigration to solve the aging population and the welfare problem, to put it, in a blunt way. And immigration clearly does not solve this problem, really, even in the short term, we can see by the UN figures presented here. 10 or 12 years of hard work is comparable to 180 million immigrants. So next time you hear somebody tell you that we need immigration to pay for all these things, you'll have something to push back on them with. Replacement migration is not necessary.